start out by saying the seeds for what is happening now were planted during the 20 years that ended in the tech and telecom bubble. Back then, too much capital chased too few ideas too soon. What do I mean by that? Too soon meant the technologies were not ready and the costs were not low enough. And just to illustrate one idea there or example, DNA sequencing, which is going to transform healthcare completely. DNA sequencing, the first whole human genome sequenced was in 2003. It took $2.7 billion and 13 years of computing power to sequence the first whole human genome. Even if costs had collapsed 75% the next year, we were not ready for prime time. Today, we're down to $500 per whole human genome in a few hours of computing power. So we are at the threshold of each of us getting our own geneticist or having our doctors consult with geneticists. And for the first time in history, we can identify mutations in our genomes. So there are 6 billion bits of code in our genomes, 3 billion base pairs of DNA. So and this is the double helix. So 6 billion bits of code. Until now, it was either too expensive or not possible to identify one mutation, which is a programming error in those 6 billion bits of code. Now we can isolate a mutation. Why is that important? Mutations are the earliest manifestation of disease. And all they are programming errors. Now, on top of being able to identify them, there are therapies already in place that will help address some of them, not all of them. In fact, not many of them. We're learning so much that the therapies will follow. But one of the most important therapies is CRISPR gene editing and other gene therapies. With gene editing and base editing and prime editing, we believe that we will be able not only to reprogram our genome and to correct the programming error, but we will also be able, thanks to the convergence of DNA sequencing, artificial intelligence, and CRISPR gene editing, we will be able to discover when our bodies are setting up to move into a disease state, when they're setting up to move into stage 1 cancer. We'll be able to catch cancer before stage 1. And we believe we will, with time, and this is going to take a lot of time, be able to reprogram our genomes and cure the disease. So that probably will, to get to that state of perfection, will take 20 to 30 years. But we do believe that the next 10 years are going to bring such hope. Already we've seen with immunotherapies, training our own bodies to fight cancer, to identify cancer and then fight it. That's causing miracle cures in cancer. We're going to see a lot more miracle cures because of this convergence of DNA sequencing, artificial intelligence, and gene therapies. So healthcare as we know it is going to transform completely. Now, the pushback we will get on that is, oh my goodness, here in the United States, we spend nearly 20% of our GDP on healthcare, double the rest of the world. And so the question we'll get is, this is going to be a real problem for us in terms of the cost continuing to explode. That is not true. What is going to happen in healthcare is this, and I'm not making light of this, is the same thing that happened to advertising. Before Google and Facebook and Twitter and other social media, advertisers used to say, I know that half of my advertising works. I just don't know which half. That's even more true in healthcare. the guesswork that has taken place in healthcare over the last, and this was doctors and scientists doing the best they could with the knowledge they had. But the guesswork, we believe, certainly here in the United States, given how litigious our society is, has caused more surgeries than necessary, and probably, in the case of thyroid cancer, for example, probably twice the number, more than twice the number of thyroid cancer surgeries than were necessary. Same with chemotherapy. I remember in the early days of Genomic Health, a company that helped doctors discover which of their patients with breast cancer would benefit from chemotherapy. And roughly half did not benefit from chemotherapy. All it did was hurt them. All it did was harm them. It took a long time for doctors to believe that this test was true and that they wouldn't be sued for a false negative. And so, it's taken time for these new tools and new therapies to move into the system. But now there's a belief that, hey, this is going to change healthcare. This is going to cause cures, and this could cut costs as we eliminate unnecessary expenses. Our biggest liability as a country here in the United States is the medical retirement liability. We believe that liability, as we're actually curing disease and identifying disease and targeting our therapies more appropriately and more specifically, more precisely, our medical retirement liabilities are actually going to go down.